Aaron, it's absolutely fantastic to have you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to start today with a little bit about yourself and your background and how did you get started with demand generation to end up becoming the VP of demand generation at Ping Identity.
Yeah, sure. Well, it started out as a technical marketing job. So I am, working at Ping Identity. We do identity security and access management software. It's like if you're familiar with single sign-on and multi-factor authentication, and then all the guts behind that, that is what we do. And I actually had been training up as an engineer, an electrical engineer. After college, I got a job in the telecom industry as a sales support engineer. I actually didn't realize that it had anything to do with sales because I didn't know anything. They happened to call it a network engineer, and I figured, okay, I got a job. So I was the guy who would do the custom configurations and whatnot to get our customers' networks to talk to our own network. And this is obviously not marketing. But I really went down that path. I was, managing an engineering team. I did it for something like 13 years. It was a great experience, just being part of the sales ecosystem, seeing how things worked, working with lots of different projects, lots of different companies. So I could see kind of how like modern companies work and kind of antiquated methods and bureaucratic and agile companies and all the different things you get to see almost like as a consultant to see different projects. But meanwhile, I was doing a lot of teaching. So I was putting myself through graduate school still in the electrical engineering path. And I was just doing a lot of teaching, and I like talking about engineering, and I was kind of building my technical toolkit, and that kind of started bleeding over into my work life, and people picked up on that. And so I started getting invited to do like the conference spot, to give a talk on the new technology. 4G wireless was this new futuristic thing on the horizon, back then. So, and I would do customer meetings or like the big RFP pitch. We're in the third round and we got to really, explain all the details about how our technology works and whatnot. So I would do that. And I really enjoyed that because it really, to me, felt like teaching. But sort of on a skill level, it was good practice of trying to translate some esoteric, technical idea or solution into a way that people could understand, when it would be kind of unfair to expect them to understand it in its normal jargon laden language, right? Like you normally have to be trained in a certain area to be able to follow what's going on when it's in the gobbledygook. So I really did a lot of practice kind of translating the tech stuff into a way that people could actually understand it. And it seemed to be going pretty well. It was really satisfying for me to see somebody kind of have that spark of realization and recognize the elegance of that technical topic. And so then to really answer your question, a technical marketing job popped up, and the hiring manager was the director of segment marketing. And he wanted to bring a little bit of technical depth into the marketing team and start shifting value propositions from like product and feature attributes towards solution marketing. And back then, solution marketing was kind of having its moment, the way like ABM is today. It was, everybody's thinking like, how do we shift towards solutions? So this was his strategy. And that guy happened to be, it's funny how careers just take a really winding path, because I'm an engineer sort of in the sales ecosystem. And a year or two earlier, I had met him and kind of lit into him about how crappy I thought our marketing was. And remember, I was part of the sales ecosystem, and I had watched my peers and my role models take a certain tone with marketing. And that's what I had learned. And that guy took I'm not proud of how I behaved, by the way, but that guy took my bullets with enormous grace, right? Like with enormous composure. And I developed a lot of respect for him. And to this day, he's one of my mentors, one of my cherished mentors. So when I saw the marketing job pop up, it was under him. And you might think of it as product marketing, but at the time it was called technical marketing. And I saw it was under him. And because I remembered that encounter and I respected him, I sent him an instant message and I said, I think you should be my boss. And that's how I got into marketing. So the solutions marketing job went well. And our careers proceeded. He was promoted, and I took over the segment marketing team, which was all vertical solutions, indirect channels, and ops. And then over time, I built a great relationship with my digital marketing DemandGen counterpart at that company. And when she moved on in her career, it was just a really obvious fit to merge her team under me. And there you go. Now I've got a DemandGen organization under me.
This is such an interesting story. Also, because you have a PhD in electrical engineering, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very unlikely, to have a head of demand generation with such a technical background. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. It seems that way, but it's going to become less uncommon, I think, because of how data heavy, mathematical, the marketing craft has become. So I feel really comfortable actually in marketing now, and I have a lot of great business problems to work on where I can apply methods that I'm familiar with, particularly statistical methods. Like, my focus in electrical engineering was actually signal processing, which is a lot of time series data. So if you imagine the squiggle going across the screen, which is very similar to financial data. There are a lot of squiggles going across the screen, and you can apply a lot of those statistical methods to that kind of data. It's a really natural fit.
And today you are a Ping Identity, right, leading the demand generation team. And I saw one of the quote that you have that says, when your business leader asks what's working, they talk to you. And I would like to learn a little more about this, because it's very interesting how you have, the pulse on every metric or all the fundamental KPIs of the business from your side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. It does require a little bit of comfort and training with data, and I'm not by any means the best at it. I'm not necessarily an expert, but there are so many sources of bias, right, and error in how we process and consume data and try to translate that into what's ultimately a conclusion or a decision, right, in business. There's so many sources of errors that can steer you towards the wrong solution that it really helps to have somebody in that ecosystem that's got some comfort with statistics and math. So I never really signed up to be the data analysis guy, but it just kind of happened, right? Because marketing was at the center, particularly because of our MarTech stack, was really at the center of all the streams of data coming together. And because I just happened to have some exposure to statistical methods, it just became a part of my job. Not by design, but it just happened. Like, people realized, oh, well, he doesn't just show me a chart, right? He shows me a confidence interval. He gives me a prediction, right? He tells me where the risks are. He points out, that this data point we had been looking at actually has all these sources of sending us down the wrong path, right? Because we didn't account for certain things like bias in how we sampled the data and that sort of thing. So that's become part of my job now at Ping. I run demand gen, we run the campaigns, I run marketing ops, but also beyond marketing, I lead the pipeline management, pipeline analysis function as a broad general management responsibility. So we set the pipeline targets, or I set the pipeline targets down to the segment, by channel, by over time, by source, and then we analyze. We monitor where we are versus target, whether we've seen like a trend appearing in the business or changing in the business. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's very, very helpful. And actually, I'm going to go back in a second and asking you more about the metrics and KPIs, because I'm interested in kind of to understand how you guys do it. But first, can you tell us more a little bit about your team at Ping Identity? How big is the company? How big is your team? And what kind of roles within the team?
Yeah. Well, our company is probably right around 1,000 employees. So we're a recent IPO, actually. We went public last year in the fall. We're growing quite rapidly, and it's actually kind of hard to keep count with how many employees and staff members we have. But I have the integrated marketing and campaigns team who manages the actual execution of our programs into market, as well as the return on those programs. I also have the marketing operations team. We do all the digital marketing, the CRM and marketing automation, managing all the MarTech stack. We've also got field and event marketing, or if you think of it as experiential marketing. We're not doing a lot of physical events these days, but we're certainly doing a lot of virtual events. And that's it.
And from a tech stack perspective, what do you guys use with such a large team? I assume you're going to have a lot of different systems.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to mislead. It's not a huge team, right? We're a small company with only 1,000 people, but we're a fairly efficient team. We're not so I've worked in both giant companies that have been around for 100 years, and also like a company like Ping that's only, I forget exactly how old we are, but we're like less than 20 years old. And at Ping, we aren't burdened by a ton of baggage, right? A lot of old legacy systems and processes and ways of doing things. We've had kind of the blessing of being able to build things the right way and change our minds, right? Because there's not, there's not this embedded inertia that's stopping us from changing and doing things the right way. So we don't need just a ton of people. We have good, smart people, and I'd say it's a fairly efficient organization. So when it comes to tech, I'll spare you the laundry list, but we obviously use CRM and marketing automation. We have a chat bot. We do personalization and a lot of testing. So certainly on our website, we really like to do hypothesis testing. Sometimes people call it A/B testing, but we actually structure all of our tests in the form of a hypothesis test. We use a predictive analytics platform for our lead and account scoring.
Can you give me some names? I know people like to hear the names here.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Well, our chatbot is Drift.
Yeah.
We do predictive analytics with Lattice Engines, who's been recently acquired by D&B. We have several intent platforms. So Bombora, of course, everyone's probably familiar with Bombora. And you may be familiar with Engagio, Leadlander. We've got actually quite a bit of tech and tons of data sources.
What's your marketing automation?
It's Marketo.
Okay.
Marketo, yeah.
So how, like, I want to now go back to the metrics a little bit. How do you measure and keep track of all the attribution and the metrics when you, at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year, depending when you guys look at the KPIs, what is that you present? What is the things you guys are working towards?
Yeah, good question. Well, I report every week, right? Not just every month or every quarter or at the end of the year. I actually report every week. I'm watching pipeline by source and segment on a daily basis, and I report on it weekly, like I said. But by Wednesday, like by midweek, I can already tell within about, plus or minus 25% how we'll end the week by Sunday night. So for me, in my role in the business, I'm very focused on pipeline, and I'm looking at not just the pipeline volume in dollars and quantity, but also the conversion rate down funnel, right? So it's not good enough for us to just fill the pipeline, right? We want to win. We need to close those deals. Now, of course, my team looks at we look at the broad menu of all metrics that a marketing practitioner should look at. I mean, certainly we're looking at all the digital metrics and things, but for me personally, as a VP of Demand Gen, I really have two main dashboards. One is a waterfall, and that helps me see the efficiency of the marketing engine. We have built our own dynamic waterfall in Tableau that helps me identify, strong and weak links in the engine. And my other dashboard that I rely on, the most would be a time plot, and its cumulative pipeline being generated by the campaigns with all of our current and former campaigns in a side-by-side race up and to the right. Now, why former campaigns? Well, because there's carryover, right? You've got leads that have entered the system from, say, a former initiative. They're still in the system and getting worked, even though our business requirements may have shifted, our priorities have shifted to a different story. So they're still happening, and they're paying off now from investments we might have made a year ago. So I look at everything, right? Everything, and I watch them side by side. They're basically competing against each other, and it's plain unvarnished results. So that way I can see, what dollars and deals came in for which campaign, what lead source, the deal values, what closed. And that view actually allows me to watch in real time the baton pass, right, from prior initiatives to new. So like this year, we transitioned from 2019 initiatives to 2020. And obviously we don't shut everything off just on calendar boundaries. There's a lot of overlap across the years. But we carefully planned the ramp down of older initiatives and the ramp up of the new ones. And I could see on my dashboards when the old program decelerated and the new one grabbed the baton. And I'll admit I do dip into Salesforce.com here and there when it's a simple thing, when it's ad hoc. But I actually don't find Salesforce to be a great way to visualize the business the way I actually manage the business. It's just kind of a repository of data for me. So by pulling it all into Tableau and building our own custom view, we can actually do calculations, dynamic calculations. I can flip a very simple, intuitive drop-down menu or something to get to a very deep level, a very deep cut of the data that I didn't realize I needed until some new business question popped up. Whereas in Salesforce, I'd kind of have to rebuild the report. And if you use Salesforce, running that report and waiting for it to recompile just in those seconds, to me, is like a living death. I just can't, I cannot stand sitting there waiting for that to happen. So that's why we've ingested that into Tableau, and then it's just a much more dynamic environment.
Yeah, I completely feel you about the Salesforce part. Salesforce reporting has been my nightmare for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But when you say, I want to see what campaigns and impacted the pipeline and pipeline source, what do you refer to? Are you looking at it from a first touch perspective, last touch, multi-touch, some combination of it? What kind of model do you use?
Yeah, good question. So when it comes to attribution, one of the great unanswered questions in marketing, right? We use our own standards, and we use different solutions for different questions. So for the main question that we were just talking about, the question of marketing originated or marketing sourced bookings compared to the rest of the pipeline, we use a blend of first and last touch. I have not yet found a solution that's satisfying to me to attribute based on the intermediate touches. I know there's some value there, but in terms of quantifying it, our methods are very rigorous, like very rigid. And I err on the side of not counting things towards marketing rather than on counting towards marketing. I don't want to get into the game that I think many marketers have felt pressured to get into of scratching for credit, because that's not what it's about, right? My charter is to drive pipeline for the company, not just marketing pipeline. And the value of me being able to see whether it came from marketing or some other source is so I can make good decisions about how we generate more pipeline for all of us. It's not about, just the marketing department getting a good rating on our performance review, that kind of thing. And it's a dangerous thing. I mean, I think a lot of marketers have been pressured into that situation. So our approach is to go ahead and set expectations and be very open with the business that these are our criteria. They're simple and easy to understand. And they're going to miss a lot of stuff that marketing might have helped on. But I don't want to get into that gray area. So I limit it basically to a first and last touch point of view. But to look at other things, there's a different version of attribution that's a very important question. And that is, within all the touches of a opportunity or a deal, how much credit would you apportion to the webinar versus the content download? Right? So even within marketing, but within the life cycle of touches, how much credit would you apportion? And for that, I have a data scientist who built a machine learning model for us to quantify those things.
I think the scratching for credit, is probably not the ideal mentality to have. But at the end of the day, when you go to the executive team asking for more money for your marketing team, and for your marketing campaigns, that's what you are asked for, to provide proof that your campaigns
Yes.
are working. So that's why for some marketers, I think there is that pressure to not waste those touches that definitely have probably contributed to, accelerate the pipeline or moving leads and accounts down the
Yes.
funnel. So how do you kind of balance that
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you can make an error in either direction, right? You can be so rigorous that you miss a lot of good value there. So that there's definitely a risk there. And that's why when I say we use first and last touch, I didn't just say we limit to first touch, right? We are trying to find the right balance for us. I think the important thing for marketers is to view the concept of return with some sobriety. Okay, you have to build it your way that makes sense, and you have to be open and transparent and honest with your CFO and your sales leaders, what it does mean and what it does not mean, right? If you turn it into taking credit for sales' deal, well, let me tell you, that's a losing debate. Sales is closing all the deals. If you use stats that you got from, say, a serious conference session, right, that are curated to look very positive, and they show 15x return on such and such, but you also suspect are probably not as rigorous as the way that you need to be. Like maybe they include the concept of influence and not sourcing. And I'm not saying influence is useless, but if you're not clear about what exactly it is and is not, then it's almost a lie of omission. It's like you're letting people believe something that isn't exactly what was said. And you kind of know that you're letting them believe that. And it is your responsibility to say it, that this says this, but it does not say this. You can't just keep your mouth shut and go, well, who am I to argue? When you set those expectations, and I've had to do that with my own CFO, this is what I mean by return, right? This is what I mean by source. We set the standards for ourselves. And then you have to start operating that way. I mean, that's how you build trust, and you have to teach the rest of the business who are not marketers how to think about marketing. And the most important piece of advice I ever got, I think, was, from my COO, actually. My current COO gave me a good little piece of advice, which I think I already knew, but it was helpful to hear it out loud. It was, don't try to just make marketing look good, right? Don't always try to show that marketing works, show that marketing has value. Show what did not work, right? Expose that you tried a thing and it failed, but that you were willing to acknowledge it. You made no apologies. You made a decision based on it, and you moved on. And over time, that system of honesty and experimentation and correction does drive the business upward. So I took that to heart, and I just exposed my data, right? I mean, I really try with my counterparts, and I've gotten a little better at it as I've gone through my career. I certainly didn't start out great at it. I've gotten a little better and a little better and a little better at showing people where it comes from and feeling no shame at revealing something that failed, but really inspecting out in the open why it failed and what I think we're going to do about that, right? What's my next hypothesis? And what result is going to allow me to judge whether that hypothesis was true or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really like this rigorous system that you set up to both track the right metrics, but also communicate and set the expectation with, finance, sales, operation, and all the other departments. I think a lot of people can learn from this.
Yeah, I really encourage people not to take like LinkedIn gurus at face value. You're going to see that PowerPoint where someone was invited to speak on the other one's webinar, and they do business together, obviously. You have to be a little cynical, right? You're going to see the post on LinkedIn that says, well, if you just did it this way, you'd get 10x return. You cannot take those things at face value. You have to take inspiration from that. And they are inspiring. They catch my eye and they inspire me. And I think, wow, what if we did it that way? Maybe it would be better for us. But then you can't judge your performance based on that number, which presents a almost false precision. It presents an appearance of precision that's just not necessarily there. And maybe the person promoting that data did apply all that rigor, but you don't know what that rigor was, and they're not going to reveal it to you. That's their proprietary thing. You do have to dive into that problem yourself intellectually and come up with what's right for your company. So I don't go from like company to company and then like some template just say, here's how you should do it. I don't know, right? I have to understand what the standards and what the situation is at that company to devise the correct new expectations, right? The new methods for that company.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is no template that works for every company at every stage, right? So every time needs to be adapted based on the situation. And so from here, I would like to start talking a little bit about lead sources and campaigns that you're running today. You know, outside of probably the usual, but what are today your top lead sources and some campaigns that is working really well for you, or a specific program that has worked out really well for you?
Yeah. Well, let's see. There's so many, and they're all like my children, right? Every program, it's hard to pick one. But in terms of lead sources, we're actually doing pretty well with webinars and content downloads off our website. We've put a lot of thought into doing fewer but better webinars and fewer but better pieces of content. We also get a lot of inbound hand raisers off of our website or via our chatbot. So we're actually pretty diversified. I don't depend on like just one lead source. In fact, I don't want to do that because then our lead volumes are not as predictable, right? We were trying to build a very predictable, well understood growth engine, particularly because we're public now, right? And we owe our market of investors real numbers that are dependable, right? That they can believe in. So I like the idea of diversification. But we've definitely been steering in the quality rather than quantity direction, because at this point we've definitely reached a point where lead volume is not our problem. It's sifting through all of that to be increasingly stingy about quality and our conversion rates. That's kind of the phase that we're in.
But do you think the 80-20 rules apply in your case for campaigns? Like if you look at what actually is driving results and pipeline with your model from an attribution perspective, are there a few campaigns that are kind of pushing more than others?
Well, that's a really interesting question. There are definitely there's a big variance across tactics. And by that, I mean like the distinction between an event or a webinar or a download. I'm not calling them campaigns on their own. There is a big variance there in terms of what they bring for us. And, one of the things we found, for example, I mentioned earlier regarding marketing attribution and the machine learning model that we built, we found, for example, so face-to-face events before everything shut down was a fairly large lead and pipeline driver for us. But in terms of ROI, they were quite expensive, right? Because as you know, events are quite expensive. So from one lens, we were looking at that and going, is that a good investment, right? My CFO was asking me that, is that a good investment? Because you do these digital marketing tactics and the ROI from that point of view is, a little higher. And that's true, from that lens, that's true. But through our model, we also found that the presence of an event in someone's journey with us was our second or third highest predictor of whether that lead would then become a pipeline opportunity, like a sales qualified opportunity. So they may be expensive to get, but you get what you pay for, might be a way to summarize that. Right?
Yeah, I think you're looking at from a predictor to become a pipeline just because they attended an event, which is very interesting. Mm-hmm. Also because you have probably, quite a bit of data that will allow you to draw that calculation and that model. But because many times, companies want to see, okay, did it stop at your booth? Did you meet in person? And so how far from that was the opportunity or the deal signature or like the agreement?
Yeah, there are a lot of explanations. Just in me giving that example, you might think, well, yeah, if they were willing to show up to an event, that makes sense that they should be much more engaged. And so there are explanations, but there are explanations for all the different touch points if someone is willing to form fill on your website or whatever. There are a lot of different plausible explanations for why a lead would be good for you or not, but quantifying it takes away the plausibility and turns it into something you can actually test, right? You can actually see whether the prediction comes true. So for that kind of point of view is very powerful to me, because then it's not just the first layer of what appears to be ROI, because there's value, like I said a moment ago, in predictability, in stability of our pipeline, right? These may be more expensive leads and opportunities to get, but I do need to protect the dependability of our pipeline, right? I can't have big swings up and down, because that causes us issues just in managing a business. So there's value sometimes beyond just the ROI, and giving it a way to quantify it, or giving us a way to quantify it, takes it out of the realm of just convincing people to trust you. And that's what you don't want to be in.
And I want to I know we have a few minutes left, but I want to touch a couple of aspects. First of all, you mentioned at the beginning, account-based marketing, being the buzzword today, like solution marketing was in the past, or inbound marketing once Markel and HubSpot launched. What is your take on account-based marketing? Do you guys have an account-based marketing strategy as part of your business today?
Yes, we do. So all of those things, and when I say they were having a moment and there's a lot of attention on them, I don't mean to dismiss them, right? There's a reason why they catch the attention of practitioners. There's always a nugget of truth. There's always some goodness in that idea. Those ideas can sometimes be grabbed and used or repurposed for some other reason. ABM has a meaning, I think, and people may joke that they disagree on the meaning, but in my point of view, like there is a meaning, and it captures to me the idea of intensity, right? Of getting away from the volume game, and I'm sure everybody's seen the pyramid of like the one to many, one to few, one to one, and all that. Get away from the volume game and really intensely pursue these human beings that you believe play a role in this decision. And you don't give up on them, right? Whereas in the numbers game, you would give up, right? If they're not ready, if they're not interested, you move on because you got 9,000 other contacts to touch. But that's not what it is with ABM. It's this intense pursuit until you really run out of your best stuff before you call it quits. And that kind of ABM is expensive. And that's usually what people call one-to-one ABM. And what I see so often and have seen, and maybe this is the non-marketer side of me speaking, right? But I see ABM in everybody's prospecting email coming to me for every piece of software that is remotely adjacent to just good marketing. I see marketing departments putting ABM on their PowerPoint saying, we run ABM. But really, they were not ready, or they weren't supported by their broader business in terms of budget and commitment of resources and that sort of thing. They really weren't able to do real ABM. They had to sacrifice. They didn't have enough money or whatever, or they didn't have room from the business to grow it over the time that it takes to grow it, because you're almost always going after these really big logos. And so they backed off one level and ended up with just good marketing, just vertical marketing. It's basically so many vertical marketing programs are called ABM. And that to me is just, targeted marketing with messaging that matches your target, your audience. That's just good marketing. We've all been striving towards that from long before ABM became a thing. So my take on ABM is, I believe that really, real ABM, if you can muster the resources and the support within your business to do it right, is a way to penetrate the people, the companies who are hardest to penetrate, right? The big financial services bank or something that everybody has at the top of their ABM list. There's a lot of noise there, right? That kind of thoughtful, intense, personalized pursuit, I think it can work. If you compromise, right, and just do decent marketing, then I think all you're going to do is engender some resentment towards the concept of ABM, and people are going to call it marketing fluff.
Yeah, I think it's also a kind of reaction to that whole inbound marketing trend that for many years was just like, throw some content out and some good leads are going to come through your funnel and then you qualify them. And so it became, like you said, a number game for many years, and people have lost a little bit, and marketing teams were kind of like just more focused on that and losing track of their good accounts that they should be targeting with a vertical marketing approach, right? It was kind of lost a little bit. At least that's what I saw.
Well, there's a role for the numbers game, right? And again, I don't mean to dismiss that. I mean, that pays a lot of our paychecks. There's a role for the numbers game. There's absolutely a role for vertical marketing. I'm just suggesting that we be honest with ourselves and call it what it is, right? Don't call it ABM if it's not. That's my only point.
Or whatever the next buzzword is going to be.
Right. Well, if you call it what it is, then it's not a buzzword, right? It's when you, it's when you pretend that then it becomes a buzzword.
And so with that, I want to close with one last comment from you on your relationship with the sales team and, the sales executive. How do you achieve alignment, or at least work towards alignment with the sales organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's a good question. Talking to each other is important. And I mean, like really talking to each other, not just through email. So much of just having good relationships at work is just remembering that you're human beings, right? And you smile and you get upset and things are hard sometimes and things are great sometimes. And you have to experience those things together. And you just don't experience it the same way through email and Slack. Operationally speaking, it's really, mostly thanks to our C-level executive team who've implemented, I mentioned earlier, I report every week. Sales reports every week too. That's part of our model. They've borrowed the weekly business review model from another very prominent company. And we're basically encouraged, forced would be one word, but I think it's an opportunity to show your business every single week. So we teach each other our respective languages of how we monitor our business. And there is no opportunity to just to hide something, right? And there's no need to, because then it doesn't become, the big once a quarter meeting where you show how everything's going and you're afraid for that not to go well. You take some of the sting out of that by just getting together every week face to face and you talk about the stuff. And it is an investment of time, by the way, but it's a worthwhile investment of time. You get in front of each other every week and you talk. And you show them your numbers. And sales and marketing's numbers are out in the open every single week. Product management sees it, support sees it, the CFO team sees it. It's openness, right? That sound like buzzwords: openness, transparency, those kind of things. But if you just do it, it actually takes all the mystery away.
Yeah, I think another important part is also to avoid that fight for credit that you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, and making it a competition versus a collaboration.
I'll share a trick that we do that helps to manage that systematically. Sometimes we find something in our algorithm and we go, this really should have been credited to sales. This was sales sourced, not marketing, or vice versa. And we want to change the algorithm. But that algorithm in that little example is going to benefit sales. So what we do is make sure, it's a small but very important detail. If we're going to shift that much credit via the algorithm, we shift that much of the target as well. So that the drive towards accuracy and truth doesn't get muddled with a drive towards credit, right? You can't get a windfall and you can't get punished in terms of your achievement towards target just by correcting something, right, in the search for truth and correctness.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. So I hope that everyone took notes of it, because I know that, getting the right collaboration with sales and avoiding that friction and discussion and arguments is something that most of the companies are kind of trying to work towards.
We do argue a little bit, but that's healthy, right? I mean, we don't always disagree. I am in marketing, but I also was in the sales ecosystem at one point. So I have some first-person experience of the reality, the realness, right? When you're in the room with the customer across the table from them, right? Face to face, and you say the stuff and they're going to react to it. you feel the importance of being real, and I really encourage people to take a tour through the sales ecosystem at some point in their career to just help to develop that appreciation. It's kind of like being in their shoes, even though I was never a frontline sales rep. But I have, I think, a healthy appreciation for that. It helps keep us real.
Yes, I agree 100% on this. So Aaron, it was absolutely great having you as a guest on the episode today. I truly enjoyed the conversation. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Franco.